And we're back with you to take a look at our grain and livestock market activity. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, and we are going to be taking a look at the markets with a little extra help from Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. Rich, thanks for joining us to open up a brand new week. I want to take a look at our overnight Globex trade here, Rich, and get your thoughts on what we're seeing here setting up for a daytime trade. So let's go to the corn market right now. And in Chicago in the overnight Globex trade, let's pull up the futures here to see if the market really moved at all or not. I kind of checked overnight and it seemed to be extremely quiet, and boy, it sure was. December corn just up one ticket last check at 344 3/4. March unchanged at 358 1/2. And if you look at the soybean trade, not a lot going on there either. We had November down 1/2. We had January down 1/2 cent at 988 3/4. So not much going on there. How about in the wheat trade? In Chicago wheat overnight, we had December now trading unchanged at last check at 426. In the Kansas City wheat market in the Globex trade overnight, we had December just 1/4 cent higher at 423. Doesn't get much quieter than that. And if you look at the Minneapolis spring wheat trade, we had December trading 1.5 higher at 612 3/4. Cotton market in that December contract actually showed a last trade of 68.84, and believe it or not, that showed it was up 196 points. So, Rich, let's dive into this here. On the crop markets, at least the corn, soybeans, and wheat, it just couldn't have been much flatter here overnight. What's it going to take to wake up this market here?
I think we will need to see some type of change regarding weather for South America. Those type of issues being number one on the focus right now. And number two, maybe some ideas as far as changing understanding of demand here in the U.S. side. Certainly in the coming months, that might take a little more time than anything else here. But with this issue with the crops in Brazil, we do have a little forecast for the second week of central Brazil seeing some rainfall, maybe getting back to normal rainfall for that specific week. But bottom line, I think right now we're waiting. Number two, waiting for Brazil to really see this emergence, and then we'll see some development and maybe some stress show up at that point in time here.
Now, this afternoon, USDA will come out with their harvest progress numbers here in the U.S. for the corn and soybean and cotton harvest progress. What do you think we'll see here for corn?
As far as numbers, last week we were about 28% done. We, of course, did have some moderate rains in some areas here last week, so that will give us maybe some lower numbers, lower than normal base planting numbers. So as it stands right now, we'll probably see this corn harvest pace rebound, maybe back into that 45% range at best here. Keep in mind the 5-year average will be right on 58% for corn. Soybean numbers as far as harvest, you'll probably see this advance from 49% last week, probably into that 65% range, still under the 72% 5-year average.
All right. Now, of course, there has been some rainfall moving through the area here, but as you move forward, of course, temperatures are cooling down, and that's going to make it a little harder for the late maturing crops to really catch up here.
Exactly right, and that's to be one thing which we've got to see maybe some changes as far as the harvest yield numbers possibly in the coming weeks. We'll see if that does change as well. But regarding this issue, regarding this second phase of harvest, certainly some questions still remain with us. As of yet, no new surprises here.
Okay, well, I want to bring you back here in a little bit and get your thoughts on the outside markets, and then we'll take a look at the numbers that came out from that cattle and feed report on Friday afternoon, and that did have a surprise in it. A lot of folks wondered if that would be the case, and it sure did seem to be. We'll talk about that when we come back, talking with Rich Nelson right after this. We're talking with Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. We're going to take a look in just a second at the livestock trade here and that cattle and feed report from last Friday. In the meantime, Rich, a lot of news last week. We had new highs, all-time record highs in a lot of these stock market indexes there, or indices, as some people say. Let's take a look at that. How much influence could that have on the ag commodity trade, either good or bad?
It is something which has been an influence and certainly will be continuing an influence. And one thing you mentioned earlier in that first segment was this issue about what do we need to change our scenario for us on commodities. That might be something to look at there as well. The idea is right now the stock market probably is sucking a lot of interest away from us on the commodity side, and certainly that problem might need to change at some point in the future to get us some type of support here.
And we can take a look at the value of the U.S. dollar index. Now, it has been chopping around here quite a bit here lately. At times, it had been showing some big gains last week. And right now on the big board here, as we look at the dollar index, we're up 290 points overnight. And it was priced at 93.860. So just something to be aware of with a firmer tone like that. Sometimes that can spill over into especially the grain trade. I want to get your thoughts on the cattle on feed report that we had after the markets closed up Friday afternoon. And, you and I talked about it all week last week, that placements number, there was such a wide variety of range of guesses there, anywhere from about 102% all the way up to 116%, extremely wide. And we said that kind of set the stage for the possibility of somebody being really surprised in the market. Well, it did come out with placements at 113% of a year ago. And I have to admit, you were one of the closest there. You were right at the top end of the range of guesses there. So apparently you actually weren't all that surprised to see it that high.
Well, once in a while you win one, sometimes you lose one as far as these type of reports go. But as far as these numbers, no doubt these were some very large September placements, largest in six years specifically for the September itself. It's very clear that cow-calf producers said we've got a very high price that's being offered for calves. In fact, about $20 higher than last year during the same fall period. And at the same time, maybe some questions about profitability on the cattle feeding end. So looks like cow-calf producers were very happy to bring numbers into town here this time around.
How long can we keep this up here with the placements running that much ahead of the pace that we had a year ago?
We can certainly run it. In this case, we'll be seen through the month of October, which we're currently in right now. That will be shown on the November report as well. Just simply the fact is we're being compared against low numbers anyway from last year. It won't be until we get the November placement numbers, which we reported in December, that we see this drop-off, because that's when we had the numbers really change last year to some large numbers.
Okay, now looking at Friday's cash cattle market activity on the livestock summary, it looks like the range of trade ran basically about 110 to 111 across the plains there. It seemed to be a fairly active trade, especially in Nebraska there, where they had about over 20,000 head that were sold. They all brought 175 on a dress basis in Nebraska there. So with everything holding roughly steady with the week before, what do you expect to shake loose here this week now?
As far as today's discussion, we'll have some lower trade on futures, obviously, due to that report. But with the successes on the cash cattle side, holding the ground steady here for that good week last week, I think we'll see some lower trade today, but maybe just stability at worst on the futures end here for most of this week here.
All right, good to talk with you, Rich. Thanks for helping us open up the trading week here. Rich Nelson of Allendale, Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois.